pillars of American democracy is that we have the right to protest all rights.
And of course, it's equal rights to have a job, to have respect.
This is about our rights. And the right to protect ourselves is for everyone.
No! And I say human, you say rights!
The fight for our rights.
To ask them to leave, and they did not leave. We placed them under arrest.
And the light has gone.
Time after time, Americans have taken to the streets to defend those rights.
I have fallen victim.
Fearlessly.
What you have chosen, what you have made of me.
Whether their livelihood was at stake or their life. Americans of our past didn't care about the potential consequences that they'd face because they believed. No, actually, they knew something was wrong with the current system.
I will stand tall.
And if our elected officials aren't up to the job, then they said, we are.
You scared?
A little.
But you're still prepared to go on with it?
Yes.
Well, what the hell was the point of all of their efforts if we're about to let government take all of it away?
Order from the government.
Yeah.
Your rights are suspended.
Just a few months ago, our country, and the rest of the world, was faced with a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, an invisible enemy that seeped its way into the life of every person on the globe. It doesn't have concern for borders. All the money in the world can't destroy it. People feel powerless, scared like little children. Everybody just wants one thing, for mom and dad to chase the monster away. But mom and dad is not our government. And our nanny state is going now too far. The men and women in office, the ones closest to our communities, our towns, our cities, are now taking advantage of our childlike fear. They've arrested us for no crime. They've destroyed our blood, sweat, and tears, given us no chance to put food on the table for our kids, and all the while surveilled our every move, like we belong to that communist nation, China, that started all of this. Well, America,
You are all in violation of the executive order.
today begins a new civil rights movement.
On that note, have a good day. Everybody be safe.
And tonight, I want to show you why, like our brothers and sisters of the past, we need to start making the decisions that will put our destinies and our children's destiny back into our hands. Hello, America. How dare him say the civil rights movement? Doesn't he know what he's saying? Yes, I do know exactly what I'm saying. And just as the American Revolution was a civil rights movement, we are seeing the beginning of something that reflects much of that same sentiment. The struggle of blacks in America is in a category all by itself. But the centuries of racism and violence preceding that movement gave it moral underpinning that really sets it apart. But in some ways, a civil rights movement always has the same basic things. There is commonality between all of these movements, including what I believe is the new civil rights movement right now and the 1960s movement. It's a struggle against an oppressive state, local government, a media that doesn't listen, an institution, all of the institutions that just don't seem to listen. It's a struggle for basic constitutional freedoms and your right to try and work and feed yourself. This is what's at stake. We are being told now, unlike at any other time in the history of the United States, that we all have to stay home and we have to do exactly what the state tells us to do. We can't work unless they tell us to work. No, wait a minute. What happened to our rights? My family moved over here because they could find their own way. They could actually pursue their own happiness. But that's not happening. I talked to a woman today in Oregon. Her name is Lindsey Graham. Not that Lindsey Graham. She's a hairdresser. Although I wish the other Lindsey Graham spent more time hairdressing. Anyway, she has been told by the state, you're not allowed to open. And they were going to fine her every day. They fined her, I think, $14,000 so far. But she's not closing. Well, they're not arresting her. What they're doing instead is using every single tool that they have in the state's toolbox. I want you to listen to just a piece of this interview that I had with her today.
They have used OSHA, Health Licensing Office, CPS, Child Protective Services, if you can believe it. They've used the city of Salem to threaten relief.
How? Wait. How were they using CPS?
So I opened my doors to my salon on May 5th, and on May 8th, Child Protective Services showed up at my home when I was at work to question my home about a, quote, claim that my household was endangering my children.
I have to tell you, you mess with my business, that's one thing, and we got to fight over that. You mess with my children and my family, you are way out of line. See, here's the difference between us and the rest of the world. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're the president or you're the homeless guy. We're equal. We're equal. And we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable or unchangeable rights. And among them are life. Nobody can come and take my life. No state can come in and just kill me like they do in China. You don't have the right. I have a right to life. I have a right to liberty. You can't come just and arrest me unless I break a law. And then you better explain it to me, and then I have a right to a free jury trial. Oh, and then I have the right to the pursuit of happiness, which means I chart my own course. That's the Declaration of Independence. That is our mission statement. That's who we are. Then the founders, they knew that government would go wrong, that they came back a year or so after they wrote the Constitution just to make sure that the government, that the people in the future really understood that governments were instituted among men to protect those rights. And those rights are outlined in the Bill of Rights, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of association, to petition. You can associate with whoever you want. You can petition the government as long as you want. You have the right to self-defense. You have a right not to be spied on. Now, most of these things other countries can't guarantee, but we do. It's part of our Constitution, and that's what makes America different and man truly free. So tonight, I just want to spend some time to see how we're doing on some of those Bill of Rights. Let's start with the First Amendment. Let's look at churches, for example. First Amendment, free exercise of religion. Do you remember that one? There are lawsuits now in 7 states over church restrictions right now. Just 2 weeks ago in Kansas City, Missouri, as part of the city's plan to reopen non-essential businesses, the mayor ordered the churches and other places of worship to record the names of people attending service. You know, to help with contact tracing in case anybody gets the coronavirus. Now we can have the church make lists of people and give it right to the government. Isn't that nice? But after getting a ton of pushback, the mayor has now made that record keeping optional. I don't know about you, but I stopped going to the church that's pulling the lever for that option. Then there's Virginia, which ironically is the homeland of Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, and I think has Death to Tyrants on their state flag. It's always up for, lately, some good old-fashioned tyranny, at least these days. The pastor of a church was now issued in Virginia a criminal citation for having 16 people at a Palm Sunday service. That was 6 people over the limit of 10 set by the governor. Oh, don't mess with him. Ralph Blackface Northam, he is coming after you, mammy, with the jazz hands and everything. Kentucky, of all states, has been especially heavy-handed towards churches lately. One Baptist church there filed a lawsuit against Governor Andy Beshear, arguing that his ban on in-person worship services violates the First Amendment. You think so? A U.S. district judge actually agreed with the church, saying, and may I quote, evidence that the risk of contagion is heightened in religious setting any more than a secular one is lacking. If social distancing is good enough for Home Depot and Kroger, It's good enough for in-person religious services, which, unlike the foregoing, benefit from constitutional protection, end quote. Is there a reason that most of these states, they're all Democrats? Is that a reason? Don't get me wrong, there are some problems with a couple of Republican governors as well. But generally speaking, why are we split on this? Why is this a political issue? Americans are understandably frustrated. Worshippers willing to stay home for a few weeks. All of us were. I'm willing to leave my business for a few weeks just to make sure the hospitals aren't overwhelmed. But now you're wondering, wait a minute, wait. Social distance, I can do that at Costco, but apparently it's impossible at my church or my business. At a rally in Riverside, California last week, Dr. Jeffrey Barkey, he's a family practitioner, summarized this frustration. Watch.
Never in the history of this country have we been told that you can't go to church because it's non-essential, but you can go get an abortion because that's essential. Never before in our country have we let criminals out of jail, but we've told you you can't exercise your Second Amendment right and protect yourself by purchasing a firearm. When liquor stores are deemed essential, but your businesses are deemed non-essential, there's something wrong going on.
Okay, let me talk some more about the First Amendment. We haven't left the First Amendment yet. What about freedom of assembly and the right to petition a government over grievances? That is still in the First Amendment. Well, you may be able to do some of those things in some states, but don't try using Facebook to organize. Recent protesters and the organizations and organizers in California, New Jersey, Nebraska had their efforts shut down. Facebook claims that it was the governments of those states that instructed them to remove the content promoting those protests. But if that isn't censorship at work, what is censorship? Also, you could just threaten the protesters like the Republican mayor of Lancaster, California. He did this a few weeks ago. Here's what he wrote. "Don't mess with us. You will not endanger the lives of our hardworking families because of some misguided civil liberties argument." The quote is, "Give me liberty or give me death." Well, being arrested and locked up in an overcrowded jail might just result in granting you your wish. Holy cow. Threatening protesters with coronavirus. Nice. Good luck with your election, Mr. Mayor. Now, the state governments are using the pandemic as a magic wand to make those pesky Bill of Rights things just disappear. That's why you saw the Raleigh, North Carolina police breaking up crowds gathered outside the local state capitol just a few weeks ago and explaining that protesting is a non-essential activity. Oh, okay. Well, then it's okay. We'll just try that First Amendment thing later when it's more convenient for you. This is crazy, and every American knows it in their heart. We are still in the First Amendment violations. I've got a lot more to go. Either the First Amendment is always essential, or it never is. Which is it? It doesn't work if it depends on what day of the week it is or what we're up against. We got to do things what we got to do. We all love the Constitution. No, we love the Constitution, period. So the Constitution stands. Non-essential is now a magic phrase being used a lot to cancel constitutional rights. I hope you weren't too attached to the Second Amendment, for example, because, that's not essential. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York, and several counties in California all declared gun stores as non-essential. You notice the pattern there? And I hope you weren't too partial to the Fourth Amendment, the one about, your right to be secure in your papers and effects and nobody can spy on you. The one that prevents unreasonable searches and seizures because big tech and government are all over your personal data. And it's getting worse. Google's community mobility reports, which analyze data on where you're going within your community and shares the information with government entities like the CDC. So you've got You've got that. You've got surveillance drones in California now, made in China, of course. In Kansas, the health department is using a GPS tracking platform called Unicast to track its citizens' location through their cell phones. But don't worry, they found a way around the state laws against that. They're just farming it out to a third party. Unicast gets location data from other applications on your smartphone. So they're not legally required to notify you that you're being tracked. Isn't that convenient? Do you really think the government is going to put these toys back into the emergencies only closet when the pandemic is over? Let me rephrase that. Do you really think that some of these politicians will ever declare this pandemic over? All of these violations in the Bill of Rights are bad enough. But the violation causing the most pain right now, by far, is covered under the 9th Amendment. And that is the amendment that basically says just because we're not listing every right here doesn't mean the government can't take away other rights that the people haven't listed, like maybe the right to earn a living. In February, America's unemployment was 3.5, best economy we've ever had. It's now officially 14.7. Only twice since World War II has the U.S. ever hit 10%, and that was during the 1982 recession and for 1 month in 2009. Last week, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassert says he believes the unemployment rate could get above 20% if the lockdowns continue much longer. They're going to. We are going to hit a peak. And we're not close to it yet. At the peak of the Great Depression in 1933, unemployment hit 25%, and I believe we can easily get there. New numbers just came out today that suggest the unofficial number has already hit 30%. Government taking away your right to work is unprecedented. Never before in this country has it happened. Well, not since we've had a king. Americans are defying shutdown orders and opening their businesses because they absolutely have to. They don't hate anybody else, but they're desperate. Yes, we're a wealthy nation, but not so much that people can afford to sit on their hands for 2 months and still pay the bills. And so far, the response from state governments is appalling. Rather than sympathizing and trying to figure out a way to salvage people's livelihoods, their dream, their pursuit of happiness, governments are in attack mode, like Governor Newsom in California, who went after nail salons trying to reopen. The state has shut down 33 salons so far. Newsom justifies this shutdown, claiming that the first community spread of coronavirus in California started in a nail salon, so they all must be bad. Last week, I talked to Carl Mankey. He's a 77-year-old who reopened his barbershop in Michigan before he was officially allowed to. He's one of the luckier small business owners. So far, a judge has sided with him, actually denied the Michigan Attorney General's attempt to close his barbershop down, but the state is still harassing him. Remember, they will use every tool in their toolbox, and I'll tell you more about that later on in the program. But back in California, Elon Musk ruffled the feathers of politicians by reopening his Tesla factory despite the shutdown. He requested that if they intend to arrest anyone, they should only arrest him. What happened? Well, they didn't arrest him. Why not? Because he employs 10,000 voters. You arrest him, you piss off 10,000 people. That's why the county didn't do anything. They fear you just a little bit. And this is the reality in communities all across the nation. People have to get back to work, and government must find its place. This is our country. You represent us. You don't tell us what to do, especially when you haven't passed a damn law. Look, all of us understand the pandemic is a unique circumstances, but tomorrow on radio, I'll tell you about the pandemic in 1968, the Hong Kong flu. It was just as bad. We didn't close anything down. We didn't do anything. You know why? Because we went on with business. That's what Americans have always done. But all over the U.S., governments have failed at striking a balance between controlling the virus, which we said was just to bring the curve down. We all agreed with that. Not keep closed until God only knows what. Well, when does it end? When we're all bankrupt? You have to strike a balance between health and constitutional rights. Government, and strangely not the federal government, thank God Donald Trump, is about to reach a tipping point. Their overreach credits have run out for far too many Americans. Americans were willing to cooperate at first to do our part, help flatten the curve. So we braced ourselves and took one for the team as some of our normal rights got steamrolled because that's what authorities said we had to do, flatten out the curve so we didn't overwhelm the hospitals. And that generally seemed to have worked. Right now, what are we doing? You're moving the goalposts. Now you're talking about corona cures as the new goal. No. Just last week, Los Angeles County announced extending the lockdown through the end of July. The governor of Illinois said churches cannot have more than 50 people in services until there's a vaccine or no new cases. And the mayor of L.A. said his city will never be completely open until we have a cure. When did we say we were going to have a cure? We still get the flu from 1918 every single year. Americans did not get into this with an idea that we were going to stay closed until there's a cure. I didn't get that memo. Did you? The only one I got was flattening the curve. People are understandably tired of the government telling them what to do. We're Americans. We have constitutional rights. We're not Canada. We're not Mexico. And we certainly, the hell, are not the old Soviet Union. People cannot afford to keep their jobs on hold any longer. I care about my health. I care about everybody else's health, but I care about the rights of my children to be able to have a country to be able to prosper in when this is all over. The desperation of Steve Walker, he's a music store owner in Michigan. He's going to have to close his business for good thanks to the shutdown. Does the governor care? Watch, I think he sums up the feeling of so many Americans right now.
I don't want a stupid handout from the government. I want my hands untied so I can work.
All right, well, I want to talk to you a little bit about Real Estate Agents I Trust, where if you are thinking about selling your home, it could be probably pretty scary right now. I feel like you're rolling the dice. For the most part, we are having a good time right now with regular run-of-the-mill homes. That market is actually doing well right now as it's starting to open. How long it lasts, I don't know. And if it's going to affect your area or not, it's actually looking like values are headed for a plunge in the not-too-distant future, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. But if you're in places like Michigan or California, you're going to start seeing a plunge on those things because people are moving here, places like Texas. A few years ago, I started a real estate agents group. It's loosely affiliated. They don't work for me. All it is we were working with some of the 500 best agents, according to the Wall Street Journal, all across America. And I started to get to know them, and I realized that there is something that they all have in common. It's the way they treat people. It's the way they approach their job. It's the way they advertise to make sure that you get enough traffic into your home. There's several things. So we put this list together, and we began to look for those agents, the best of the best, all over the country. It's a free service to you, and I recommend that you do your homework. Go and interview several real estate agents. But if you need to get your home sold on time for the most amount of money, and you need the one that I think is the best in your area, go to realestateagentsitrust.com. Don't trust me. Don't trust them. Do your own homework. realestateagentsitrust.com. In case you're just joining the program right now, before the break, I went through the coronavirus tyranny from state to state, that local and state governments are wreaking havoc on many of our fundamental rights. But there's an unfortunate reality to all of this, and it's this. A lot of our fellow Americans, both Democrat and Republicans, apparently are comfortable letting government suspend some of their basic constitutional rights in the name of battling the pandemic. The Atlantic and the National Constitution Center partnered on a poll in which they asked people about 8 different potential government policies that would suspend various rights. The majority of respondents, regardless of political party, supported all 8 policies. According to this poll, most Americans are okay with violating the Constitution in order to fight the pandemic. This is insane. Does this reflect a general lack of understanding of our Constitution? And if so, we've got a different kind of national emergency on our hands. I don't want to undermine the horrific reality that this virus has already killed over 90,000 Americans. It is colossally tragic. Of course, we have to take coronavirus seriously. I was wearing these before they were fashionable. Now I just wear them because I hear they're Indians in this part. They're behind me, aren't they? Anyway, we should not fear catching this virus. It cannot override our most basic constitutional rights. That's not a bargain we make with the government. It already operates far outside the boundaries of original design. But when you unplug certain fundamental rights, there is no guarantee that they will boot up when you want to plug them in again, especially when one half of the political system is being overtaken by a virus of its own called socialism. But most of all, I want you to understand, this tyranny that I'm discussing tonight is not from just the Democrats. It is mostly, but there are governors and mayors across the country that are Republicans as well. While Americans are desperately trying to figure out how to make ends meet, the Democrats are busy designing their socialist field of dreams. If you will build it, they will succumb. Democrats know the time is right to attempt an extreme makeover of America. Socialists feel it too. This was Bernie Sanders last Sunday on ABC television.
To tell you the truth, that if there is any silver lining in the midst of this terrible, terrible, and unprecedented moment in American history in terms of the economy, in terms of the pandemic, it is that maybe we start rethinking some fundamental tenets about the way our government and society works.
Yes, we should. The silver lining has helped Democratic Socialists of America add 10,000 members over the past 2 months. It's their biggest gain since the 2019 midterms, or 18 midterms. The DSA credits this surge in membership to the failures of government during the pandemic. Yet they don't see the irony of their goal of giving even more control to that government that's incompetent. What would a post-pandemic Democratic Socialist of America look like? Well, there are subtle hints all over the place. Shall we look? Nancy Pelosi's 1,800-page, $3 trillion coronavirus relief bill, which the House Democrats passed on Friday. Fortunately, the Senate will likely bury it, and President Trump has promised to veto it if it did pass. But the bill provides a telling look at the socialist dreams of Democrats. Apparently, Seth Rogen helped author the bill because cannabis is mentioned like 68 times. Meanwhile, the word economy appears 2 times. That's helpful. And by the way, Democrats passed this bill without any negotiation with anyone else in the House. The Pelosi bill sets aside $50 million for environmental justice that will grant to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Really? The EPA would have to use the money to investigate or address the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 pandemic in environmental justice communities. Okay, so I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm not fluent in it, but I do speak a little bullcrap. So let me run it through the bullcrap to English translator. I think what they're saying here is that coronavirus needs to be arrested and prosecuted for racism. I think. I don't know. The bill also removes the requirement that illegal immigrants have a social security number to be able to get financial assistance. And it includes federal grants for state and local law enforcement to train employees in identifying and classifying hate crimes. Whew, we got that going. The same people who redefine sexual assault as saying good morning to a woman now want to redefine hate crimes? Sounds like a great idea. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for instance, things like this. The San Antonio City Council unanimously voted to classify the word Chinese virus, China, as hate speech. If you're wondering what any of this has to do with the coronavirus relief, join the club. Much of Pelosi's bill echoes the things that the Democrats have been saying in their original blueprint for the Green New Deal, especially the environmental justice stuff. And if you think that means just treating squirrels and trees fairly, you are way off. Because when you actually read through the blueprint, you find out that saving the environment is a marketing hook. And that's it. The deal is really about fundamentally overhauling society and killing capitalism. In their blueprint just last year, House Democrats described how one of their goals for a Green New Deal is to, quote, mitigate deeply entrenched racial, regional, and gender-based inequalities in income and wealth, including, without limitation, ensuring that federal and other investment will be equally distributed to historically impoverished, low-income, deindustrialized, or other marginalized communities in such a way that builds wealth and ownership at the community level and promote economic and environmental justice and equality. Wow, that sounds great! A total redistribution of wealth from a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington. America is going through an unprecedented pandemic right now. And Joe Biden thinks it's good times right now to let everybody know the new Green Deal committee is being put together for his presidency. And guess who he put in charge of that effort? Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, and just for craps and giggles, John Kerry. I told you last year, as ridiculous as it is, the Green New Deal is not going away. By setting up a committee, Biden, who doesn't even know what time it is, what day it is, or what his name is making a serious gesture that this is something he's going to prioritize in his administration because, I don't know, where Oval Office, is that the round room? This off-brand, far-left fringe group, socialists, change is in the air to them. It's threatening enough to our constitutional system under normal circumstances. But the coronavirus environment has given the movement a shot of adrenaline and a new sense of urgency. And damn it, America, you better wake up. Last month in Hawaii, for example, the state unveiled what it calls a feminist economic recovery plan for COVID-19. Ugh! The plan includes things straight from the Socialist and Green New Deal playbook, like universal basic income, special emergency funds for marginalized group. Forget everybody else. Are you a special group? A $25 an hour minimum wage for single moms and free child care for all essential workers. But if you're a non-essential worker, you're on your own. Fortunately, Hawaii has the perfect climate for growing money on trees, so paying for all that stuff is really not going to be a problem for them. The pandemic has also made the drumbeats even louder for universal health care and federal jobs guarantees because, as the logic goes, only a full-bore nanny state can save us now. Climate change, coronavirus, and murder hornets as well. We're so screwed. We're so screwed. Here, comrade, just take my rights. It's our only hope. Help us, Obi-Wan. To help ensure that enough Democrats and socialists are in office to pass all of this nonsense, they're currently mounting an all-out assault on the election system as well. Earlier this month, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order to make sure that they would mail ballots out to all of California's registered voters in this year's November election. The fact that Los Angeles County alone has a voter registration of 112% of its actual population tells you all you need to know about this horrible, horrible idea. Yet, vote by mail is now one of the Democrats' pet projects. It's all rolled up into their campaign to get rid of the Electoral College system. Remember, Eric Holder, the former Attorney General under President Obama, he recently told Time magazine, coronavirus gives us an opportunity to revamp our electoral system. These are changes that we should have made permanent because it will enhance our democracy. Oh, thank you, Dracula. If you mean democracy, you mean something like Russia, no thanks. But yes, this kind of election corruption would get you there in a hurry. Coronavirus has created a true crisis moment for America's freedom. The Bill of Rights is getting mangled and people are frightened. Perfect conditions for the left. This is the playground they've been dreaming for and dreaming about since FDR. All right, we have a major crisis of common sense happening in this country. 2 months is all it took. In fact, it took less than 2 months to make America unrecognizable. Do you remember Carl Menke? He's the 77-year-old barber in Michigan who I mentioned earlier. A judge stopped the attorney general in Michigan from shutting him down, but that didn't stop the state. Last Thursday, Michigan took away his business license. Instead, now he's facing potential fines of $1,000 a day, possibly even $1,000 per haircut, and jail. What insane version of America is this? Since when is it in the interest of a state to go after a 77-year-old man whose business was already shut down for 2 months because the state deemed it non-essential, who's now so desperate that he has to open his store in the middle of this just to put food on the table? I talked to Carl last week, and this was not some grandstanding, political statement thing for him. He's a regular, hardworking guy. Reminds me a lot of my dad, just like millions of other Americans whose head is spinning over what his government has turned into overnight and turned on him just for trying to make a living. Do you recognize your country right now? Do you recognize Michigan as part of the United States of America and all of the freedoms that we've always thought we had?
Well, I'll tell you what I do recognize. Back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, I was, pretty much opposed to anything that was oppressive. The Democrat Party at that time stood for freedom of speech, human rights, civil rights, non-oppressive government. They've completely flipped around and become the oppressive government, the suppressive government, the censor for any type of speech. So I don't recognize that party anymore as being anything other than a police state. I mean, that's what we have here now. When she took my license, that was a police state action.
Carl Menke is now in the trenches of the new civil rights movement, I think. He's not trying to be a hero. He's just trying to exercise his normal rights as an American. And unfortunately, this kind of petty, tyrannical aggression from government is growing. There is a huge erosion of the public trust, and people are fed up. Common sense involves the ability to pick your battles, and the government has been terrible at this. You may have seen a video of the woman in the New York City subway handcuffed in front of her toddler and hauled away by police. The woman's wearing a mask, just not wearing it properly. Then there was this woman arrested for sitting on a bench in Miami while holding a sign that said, "We are free." In Pennsylvania, 6 counties have declared their intention to reopen, even though they haven't met the state's threshold for reopening. Sheriffs in several of those counties have said they're not going to issue citations to businesses that violate the state's shutdown order, again, because people are desperate to reopen their business just to survive. But how does Governor Tom Wolf respond? On Twitter, of course, threatening to withhold funds from those counties and threatening to take away business licenses. Well, then I don't pay my state income tax, quite honestly, if that were me. How about the waffle shop in Fresno, California, which reopened before it was supposed to on Mother's Day weekend? It had a line going out the door. Police arrived and enforced the city's shutdown. Several customers blocked the entry, trying not to let the police inside. A very minor scuffle broke out. Police arrested a 73-year-old Vietnam veteran who was there with his wife. Good job. So far, the waffle shop owner has been fined $5,000 for opening too early. A cafe in Castle Rock, Colorado also violated the state shutdown order. The owner explained she would go out of business if she didn't do something, so she did. Despite overwhelming local support for the cafe, the state pulled the cafe's business license indefinitely. One of the cafe's customers voiced common frustration with the abuse all across the nation. Listen.
I will make the best decisions for myself and my family. That's not up to the government. That's not up to anybody else. I will do that, and I support what they're doing here. This thing stopped being about the coronavirus a long time ago, and now fear is just ruling everything.
I'm more afraid of the government than I am of any coronavirus. People are exhausted with this level of crackdown, and it's not going to end well. Even some law enforcement agencies and officers are starting to get fed up. One Seattle police officer we told you about last week recorded this video on duty, which resonated with a lot of people and a lot of policemen around the country.
We need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works.
Just so you know, Officer Anderson, he's now been suspended. All of the over-the-top government, out-of-control policies. Michigan, I think, is ground zero, if there is a ground zero here. Last week, 4 medical providers in Michigan sued Governor Gretchen Whitmer for her drastic and unconstitutional stay-at-home orders. Part of their lawsuit calls for allowing hospitals to perform procedures that are currently classified as non-essential. Like, cancer treatments. Canceling those procedures is one of the reasons thousands of healthcare workers in Michigan have been furloughed or laid off. Governor Whitmer's support in Michigan seems to be melting down. Who knows? A week before that lawsuit, Republican leaders in the Michigan State House and the Senate sued Whitmer for unlawfully extending Michigan's state of emergency until the end of May. But even just last week, Governor Whitmer still had this condescending reminder for Michigan residents. Listen to this.
These executive orders are not a suggestion. They're not optional. They're not helpful hints.
And yet, according to a nationwide review of smartphone data, no state saw a larger drop in the share of people staying at home last week than in Michigan. Even though its stay-at-home order remained in place, approximately 1 million people there started moving around again. Nobody defied their governor more than in Michigan. You don't say. Could there be some sort of correlation between the strictest and most unreasonable nanny state lockdown policies in the nation and the number of people who are like, screw you? Who would have seen that one coming in America? Only anyone who has ever parented a teenager would see this one coming. We're not kids. For the most part, Americans are reasonable people. Until you start ratcheting up crazy. We'll cooperate, but don't tell us what to do, because you're crazy. This has been a distinguishing characteristic of Americans throughout centuries. We cannot lose this. Our whole existence is based on America saying, government works for us, not the other way around. The last 2 months have been a nightmare. Total implosion of common sense. First, government turning on people, and now more and more incidents of people turning in one another. It's not a good recipe. Last week, comedian Kevin James released a short parody called Out of Touch, which he ran. I don't know if you saw it. When you watch the whole thing, it'd be easy to read as a critique of the government overreach. Government's out of touch. But let's be honest, so are a lot of people. The kind of tattling that is going on all across America is bone-chilling. I don't remember a time in my lifetime when citizens spied on each other like they're doing now. It's bad enough that we're dealing with government overreach. Now we have these citizen do-gooders that are spying on us like it's World War I and Woodrow Wilson. Let's call 911, please. But let's call 911 because... not because of that investigative bike journalist hero, but because our Constitution is on fire. Our children, if you go back into history and you look at the different things that have happened throughout history, we've been hearing that we're all in this together, right? We're all in this together. Well, we're not. We're really not, because we have to extend grace to one another, not rat on one another. There can't be any togetherness. In fact, it goes worse than that. In George Orwell's novel 1984, there's a scene in which the main character Winston runs into a former coworker in prison. The coworker tells him with weird pride and amazement that his children turned him in to the authorities. Isn't that great? The children in the novel are so ingrained with the extensions of Big Brother's spying network that their only loyalty was to the state. How far do you think we're going down this road? Now, obviously, that's an extreme example, but it's been done before in the last 100 years. What are we teaching our children right now? Now, America has had 3 major civil rights movements in our history. 4, if you count the American Revolution. Inspired or led by Thomas Paine, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. I think the 4th is here now. We've got to learn the lessons of the past. People are getting angry, but that's the worst thing we can do. Tonight, we've made the case why it's imperative that you become a civil rights activist, no matter who you vote for. But a true civil rights movement only works when a few things happen. And here they are. One, a growing sense that people are being trampled on. People are definitely being trampled on right now. There's a growing awareness of it nationwide. Don't you think? In most places. Second thing that has to happen, finding somebody in a leadership position who knows how to package the movement. And other organizations have to come together, like Payne, Lincoln, and MLK. They didn't do it by themselves. MLK did it with the labor unions. We don't have that at this point, but I think somebody is going to emerge. Something's happening. The third is a definite plan, a definitive plan, an end goal. Freedom from the king, freedom of all men, dignity of all men. These are the three movements in our history, and they all had that in common. Unfortunately, the current one is becoming more like the original movement, freedom from a king. Only now, the king might not be in Washington. It may be in your state house or on your city council. The values we need are all in the Bill of Rights. We also need the rule of law. As long as that law is reasonable, common sense, and to protect the rights of the people. It's our constitutional process. We also understand the state government has some leeway to respond to pandemic situations, but those measures must be temporary and not violate basic constitutional rights. Clearly, the government is overplaying its hand in many states, and it is time to take a firm but tactful stand. Be respectful, be heard, do not sit down. Common sense is on the ropes. And it's why it's more important than ever for you to stay informed and get recharged for the struggles ahead. May I recommend you join us? Become a member of the Blaze. We're on your side. You're on our side. BlazeTV.com/Glenn. Use the promo code Glenn. When we come back, you know that gym up in New Jersey? We thought everything was fine? Not so much. We have the owner with us next. I was told to say, because of network restrictions, that our guest is going to be delayed a bit. But I have to be truthful with you. Because of my big fat mouth, we have to delay. I'm going to go right to my YouTube page, and we're going to have Ian Smith on us. He is the owner of Attila's Gym. That's that gym up in New Jersey where the cop came and everybody said, "Oh, no, it's great. He's gonna throw us all in jail." He didn't. Everybody cheered, went away, but now there's trouble at the gym. Now the police have come and started to arrest people. We're going to talk to Ian Smith, another civil rights hero standing up. We'll do that on the Glenn Beck YouTube page. Back in a minute. When this coronavirus thing happened, I started doing some artwork. This is the first painting that I did. It reminds me to tell you, never give up. Never give in. Good night.